Now to some blockbuster new reporting today on the secretive Mueller probe from the Washington Post that reports, quote, the Mueller operation, like the former Marine Corps platoon commander who leads it, is secretive and methodical. 10 blocks west in the White House, President Trump combats the probe with bluster, disarray, and defiance as he scrambles for survival. The president vents to associates about the FBI raids on his personal attorney, Michael Cohen, as often as 20 times a day, in the estimation of one confidant. And they frequently listen in silence, knowing little they say will soothe him. Also unlikely to soothe him, new reporting about the special counsel's interest in the president's former fixer and personal attorney, Michael Cohen. The Wall Street Journal reporting today, quote, Mr. Cohen talked to associates about building a huge practice. He mused about approaching foreign governments and foreign firms. His work did have an impact in one way. It dragged some of the world's largest corporations and other firms into special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. And speaking of Mr. Cohen's interest in adding foreign governments to his client list, the attorney for porn star Stormy Daniels is playing a game of chicken with Cohen on Twitter with this threat for Cohen, intended to raise questions about Cohen's client work. Let's bring in our guest, one of the reporters with the byline on that remarkable Washington Post story, White House reporter Ashley Parker, an MSNBC analyst. Jeremy Bash is here, former chief of staff for the CIA and the Pentagon, also an MSNBC analyst. And with us on set, attorney Michael Avenatti. Let me start with you and that tweet. What are you threatening? What are you insinuating?
Well, I don't think we threatened or insinuated anything. I mean, I think we followed it up with some statements that have yet to be refuted. It's clear that on December 12th of 2016, Michael Cohen, who was not registered as a lobbyist and was not registered as a foreign agent, is seen taking some very high-ranking Qataris up the elevator. They exit about an hour and 40 minutes or an hour and 30 minutes later. Michael Flynn is there at the same time. And we find it very suspicious that Michael Cohen appears to be assisting the Qataris and having access to the president on this particular day. I mean, I don't think they were going up in the elevator to have lunch or dinner.
But I guess the White House had an incredibly anti-Qatari policy posture until very recently. So if he was I mean, I'm with you until the part where it seems you're alleging that the Qataris got anything out of this.
Well, I mean, AT&T didn't get anything out of it either, right? I mean, they had a very anti-AT&T stance as it relates to the merger, and that didn't stop AT&T from paying all of those monies to Michael Cohen for access. So we can't look back in time and look at what the ultimate result was and then say, well, they must not have been paying for it, or they didn't get what they paid for. That's not the test. The issue is that you have Michael Cohen clearly in the weeks after the election selling access to the president, to the highest office of the land, when he's not registered as a lobbyist and he's not registered as a foreign agent.
And you've seen Mueller charge people for, Paul Manafort has been charged for the second, I guess, is it an allegation? Are you alleging that that's what Michael Cohen did? Or are you suggesting that questions be asked? I just want to be really clear.
No, I'm alleging that that's exactly what happened. And now you have an affidavit that was filed in federal court by someone that was close to one of the individuals in the elevator. And that affidavit states that the individual bragged to him that they had effectively bribed an administration official, namely Michael Flynn.
And let me just understand how this fits into the Stormy Daniels legal case. And let me understand if something has changed. I mean, you said to me earlier that you're basically a repository for all sorts of evidence now and data points for examples of corruption on the part of Mr. Cohen and the Trump orbit. How does it fit into your larger role to bring these things to light?
Well, look, Nicole, and I think we've been really clear about this. We're in a position where we believe that people should have the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and should have the facts and the evidence.
About the Qataris?
Well, if necessary, the Qataris or others, AT&T, others. It doesn't matter at this point. The fact of the matter is if information comes into our possession that we believe is credible and that we believe people should be asking questions about, we're going to release it publicly. And ultimately, people can decide whether it's credible or not, or whether there should be follow-up investigation or not. It's just that simple.
Let me ask you about what you deem credible, because obviously here as a news organization, we haven't been able to independently corroborate the individuals in the picture. And I know you're protecting your sources. You and I had this conversation last week. What is your standard standard for information you deem credible? You said you're in receipt of mountains and volumes of information.
We have a very high standard, and no one has disputed the one identification that we've made of the individual in the picture. I think it's pretty clear that that's who it is. No one's claimed otherwise. Michael Cohen and his attorney could very easily come forward and claim otherwise. Others could come forward and dispute what we've said. They haven't disputed that, just like they haven't disputed 99.35% of the information that we released last week. So I think we have a pretty good track record. I stand behind the accuracy of what we've released.
Let me bring Ashley Parker in, who's got some unbelievable reporting about the impact of the Cohen raid and of this growing body of evidence about how Cohen was conducting his post-election business. Actually, this would be business conducted during the transition. It seems that this is a raw nerve for the president. Revelations about how Michael Cohen was holding himself out to potential clients, and the fact that now there are at least two avenues of the Cohen investigation. There's the Southern District of New York. There's all of the questions that Bob Mueller has had. Talk about what you reported in your piece about the president yelling about those Cohen raids up to 20 times a day.
Sure. So basically, the Cohen raids were sort of a psychic or cosmic turning point for the president in his thinking about this entire investigation. And to be clear, we all know from his tweets, he was never happy about this probe. But there was a period at which the people in his orbit, the people in his White House, and the people on his legal team could kind of play to what he said and believed, which is that he had done nothing wrong, that there was no collusion, and to say, this, you know, the more you cooperate and the easier and the sooner you cooperate, the sooner this will all be wrapped up and you will be vindicated. And Mueller is incredibly thorough, so when you are vindicated, you know, it will be a true vindication, and it will mean you really are cleared. And there was a period, again, save for sort of his angry rants and his tweets, where he was kind of going along with that plan. And then when the Cohen raids happened, he just sort of felt like a couple things. He felt that Mueller's investigators were no longer operating in good faith, and it sort of crossed this red line for him, where he felt like this probe had gone way too far afield. It was going into, you know, not quite his family, but people who were very close to him, people who hadn't even come to the White House with him, someone who didn't have an official role in the campaign, someone who handled his business and his family dealings, and that's when he really got furious. And as we mentioned, this is something he talks about nonstop. He mentioned it, one person told us, up to 20 times a day, and aides just sort of stand there and don't quite know what to say because they know there's nothing that can calm the president down.
Jeremy, I want you to tie these pieces together, seemingly unrelated. The Qataris, the U.S.-Qatari position, which was viewed as pretty hostile to the Qatari position on the blockade at the beginning of the administration. It seems to have shifted a little bit. But this also ensnares two individuals that Ashley highlights in her piece who are very much of concern to people watching the Mueller probe closely, and that's the president's son, Don Jr., and Jared Kushner. And we've got some reporting. NBC has reported that the Qataris opted not to give information on Kushner and secret meetings to Mueller, I guess deciding that they didn't have an obligation to cooperate. But could you try to pull together all of these threads? Michael Avenatti talking about Cohen's pay-to-play business. We see more and more data points on that. As Ashley's reported, the Cohen raid and the idea of Cohen's files being dumped and turned over to the FBI, a real trigger for the president, causing 20 outbursts a day. And then two of the people closest to him, family by any definition, very much under scrutiny by Mueller and perhaps other investigations for their contacts with foreign governments.
Yeah, well, the government of Qatar is very close to the government of Iran. And in some ways, Qatar has split from its other Gulf Sunni countries, Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, and has really adopted a line of foreign policy that's been antithetical to U.S. interests. And so Qatar had a lot of ground to make up. And as you noted, Nicole, Qatar found itself kind of on the wrong side of the Trump administration's perceived foreign policy approach at the beginning of the administration. I don't know that it's the fact that they got nothing for if they did hire Michael Cohen or using Michael Cohen as a conduit. It could have been a lot worse for Qatar. Maybe they sanded some of the edges off the U.S. policy. I don't think we know, and I don't think we understand fully yet, unless Michael knows or has evidence of, what exactly was the relationship. Did they hire Michael Cohen? Did they pay him? Did they merely say, get us a meeting and then we'll pay you later? And what were they specifically asking and requesting? Who were those people in the elevator? who were they meeting with and what were they seeking? So I think these are all very legitimate, very significant questions that I think we have to understand before we can make any judgments about whether or not this was merely swampy or actually illegal.
Any thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think that's right. We haven't disclosed everything we know yet. But look, I don't think those gentlemen are in the elevator with Michael Cohen at Trump Tower at that time period because they're interested in, picking up some Christmas gifts or for lunch or dinner. I mean, let's call it like we see it. I mean, you can see it on the video. You can see it on the pictures. We've already identified one of the individuals. We think we're close to identifying the second individual. And look, if we're wrong about this and there's some innocuous reason for this meeting, like, they wanted Mr. Trump's autograph or something like that, then let them come forward and talk about it.
Michael, hold on. Can I just ask?
Go ahead.
So, Michael, do you know, for example, whether or not they engaged Michael Cohen to actually represent them? Or was it possible that they were having a meeting along with dozens of other foreign delegations during the transition to sit down with Trump and his inner circle, including people he had worked with, including people he might have hired in the administration? I mean, what do we know and what do we not know?
Well, I'll tell you that what we do know is that this was not just a standard foreign dignitary visit in order to introduce themselves to Mr. Trump, and I'm going to leave it at that.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.